Welcome to Credit and Coffee. This is a story about how losing a substantial sum in cryptocurrency led me to discover the true meaning of freedom, far beyond any financial gain. I remember the hum of the servers in the office, a low, constant thrumming beneath the polished floorboards of the tech startup where I spent my days, a sound that once felt like progress, like the future unfolding, but which had slowly come to feel more like the quiet whir of a gilded cage. My role there was good, prestigious even, with a comfortable salary that paid for our well-appointed house in a neighborhood where the lawns were always meticulously manicured and the SUVs gleamed fresh from the wash. My wife, a diligent professional in her own right, contributed significantly, and together we presented a picture of success, of having achieved the dream. But beneath the surface, there was a subtle anxiety, a constant comparison with the neighbors whose stock options had truly exploded, whose second homes were always being renovated with the latest architectural trends. We weren't house poor in the dire sense, but there was a quiet desperation to maintain appearances, to keep pace with an invisible standard that always seemed just a little out of reach. That standard felt like a phantom limb, always there, always aching for more. I would sometimes find myself staring at the perfect uniformity of our neighbors' hedges, feeling a strange mix of admiration and quiet resentment, wondering how they always seemed to be just one step ahead, how their lives seemed effortlessly curated, while mine felt like a constant performance. The scent of freshly cut grass, which should have been pleasant, often carried with it the faint tang of expectation, the silent pressure to not just keep up, but to surpass. Even the quiet clinking of ice in a glass during a neighborhood barbecue felt like a subtle tally being kept, a scoreboard of successes measured in square footage and luxury brands. It was exhausting, this silent competition, leaving me feeling hollowed out despite the outward sheen of prosperity. The thought of my aging parents, who had worked their entire lives for modest comfort, also weighed on me, a deep-seated worry about their future medical needs, the rising cost of elder care that felt like a ticking clock in the back of my mind. I wanted to build a fortress for them too, a safety net woven from something stronger than just a comfortable salary. That's why in those quiet hours after my wife had drifted to sleep, after the last emails had been sent and the empty coffee cup sat cold on my bedside table, I found myself drawn into the nascent world of cryptocurrencies. It started small, a curiosity, a few $100s here and there, a test of the waters. I'd read about Bitcoin, of course, the early adopters turning pennies into fortunes, and I saw an opportunity, not just for more wealth, but for real freedom, a release from the golden handcuffs of my job and the silent pressure of our neighborhood. This wasn't just about income, it was about passive income, about generating a safety net so substantial that the next layoff, the next economic downturn, the next unexpected bill from my aging parents wouldn't touch us. I started with a reputable exchange, buying modest amounts, watching the charts with an almost hypnotic fascination. The screen's blue light cast a cool glow on my face in the dark room, and the quiet click of my mouse felt like a secret heartbeat of my ambition. The volatility was exhilarating, terrifying at times, but the upward trends, those dizzying surges, promised a future where I wouldn't have to chase promotions or stress about quarterly reports. The graphs, with their unpredictable peaks and valleys, became a language I was determined to master, a secret code to unlocking a different kind of life. I convinced myself this was smart risk management, diversifying our investments beyond traditional stocks and mutual funds, though I kept the specifics largely to myself, a private venture, a secret weapon. I'd mention it vaguely to my wife that I was exploring new investment avenues, and she'd offer a non-committal trusting my judgment, or perhaps just too busy with her own demanding career to delve into the details. I interpreted her as a silent endorsement, a quiet blessing for my ambitious quest, pushing away any flicker of concern that might have come with a more detailed discussion. The quiet thrill of seeing those numbers climb, even slightly, was addictive. Each small gain was a vindication, a whisper that I was on the right path, finally taking control. I remember the chill of the morning air on my face as I walked to my home office, the scent of fresh coffee brewing, a sense of quiet purpose swelling within me, a conviction that I was on the cusp of something truly transformative. I confided in a close friend, another tech professional, about my burgeoning crypto portfolio. He was skeptical at first, then intrigued, and soon we were trading advice, sharing insights, the camaraderie of mutual pursuit. We'd talk late into the night, the glow of our phone screens illuminating our faces, dissecting market movements, theorizing about the next big altcoin, the next innovation in the blockchain space. The air in his study, thick with the scent of old books and ambition, felt charged with possibility as we sketched out our digital futures. We'd map out potential scenarios, predict market shifts, and celebrate even the smallest gains, a shared secret society of digital alchemists. My initial few $100s had become a few thousand, then tens of thousands. The excitement was a constant current beneath my skin, an internal buzz that made everything else seem dull in comparison. I started moving some of the more significant amounts to a personal wallet, a cold storage device that felt like holding a small, digital treasure chest. The smooth, cool plastic of the device, nestled securely in my hand, gave me a false sense of tangible control over the invisible wealth it represented. The sense of security, of having direct control over my assets, was empowering. This wasn't just money in a bank. It was my asterisk money, held in my hands, answerable to no one but myself. The numbers continued to swell. I remembered one evening, the pale glow of my monitor reflecting in the dark glass of the window, showing a balance that had just tipped past $75,000. $75,000. It wasn't life-changing money yet, not enough to retire, but it was a substantial amount, a tangible symbol of my growing conviction, a proof that my instincts were right. It felt like I was winning, finally, escaping the slow, methodical grind, the quiet desperation that I sometimes felt seeping into the very foundations of our seemingly perfect life. I envisioned this as the bedrock, the foundation for true financial freedom, a way to ensure our children, when they eventually came, would never have to worry about student loans or the burden of medical debt. This was my legacy, building itself block by digital block, a silent promise to a future family. The marital strain wasn't overt yet, but it was there, a subtle tension, a widening crevice in the foundation of our shared life. My focus shifted. Conversations about our day sometimes felt superficial as my mind drifted back to the charts, the potential gains, the perceived threats. I found myself checking my phone under the table during dinner, a quick glance at the market fluctuations, a silent negotiation with myself about timing. My wife noticed my preoccupation, the late nights, the sudden shifts in my mood tied to market swings. She'd ask if everything was all right, her voice gentle, but tinged with a faint concern that I was quick to dismiss. Her hand would sometimes reach for mine across the table, a silent invitation for connection that I often missed, my mind miles away in the digital ether. I'd reassure her always, telling her it was just a new project, a complex investment strategy, something that would ultimately benefit us both. I believed it truly. I believed I was safeguarding our future, ensuring a smoother path forward, a buffer against all the uncertainties of life. The idea of losing it, of that fragile digital fortress collapsing, felt impossible, a distant, abstract fear I pushed away, convinced that the layers of security, the decentralized nature of blockchain made it invulnerable. The cold, hard logic of technology, I thought, would protect it. But logic, as I would soon discover, had its limits, especially when pitted against the unpredictability of human error and malice. The chill of the morning air seemed colder then, and the coffee less comforting. My sleep became shallower, broken by the subconscious calculations of potential gains and losses, my dreams filled with abstract numbers and flickering charts. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen at night, once a comforting backdrop, now sounded like a low, incessant drone, amplifying the restless energy within me. The meticulously manicured lawn outside, once a symbol of our aspirations, sometimes felt like a perfect facade, concealing a growing unease within the very walls of our lives. Even the taste of my favorite dark roast coffee, usually so grounding, began to lose its depth, tinged with a faint bitterness that mirrored my internal state. The day it happened began like any other, a Tuesday morning. The scent of our usual breakfast, blueberry pancakes, lingered faintly in the air, a sweetness that would soon turn acrid in my memory. I had just finished my first cup of coffee, the warmth of the ceramic mug still radiating into my hands as I settled into my home office. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a picture of domestic tranquility that was about to be shattered. My plan was to move a portion of my crypto holdings, specifically a chunk of altcoins I'd been watching, from my main, more public wallet on a major exchange to a more secure, less exposed cold wallet, and then to a new, smaller platform I'd been experimenting with for some niche trading. The process was usually straightforward: authenticate, initiate transfer, confirm. My fingers danced across the keyboard with a practiced rhythm, the familiar motions a source of quiet confidence. But today something felt off. The interface of the new platform was sluggish, unresponsive, and a strange error message flashed across the screen when I tried to log in, something about an unrecognized device. My heart gave a little skip, a small flutter of unease that I dismissed as a momentary glitch, a minor inconvenience in the digital landscape. I tried again, slower this time, double-checking every character of my password, feeling the cold smoothness of the keycaps under my fingertips. My breath held. Still the same message. A cold trickle of apprehension began to spread through my chest, a prickle of unease that quickly escalated. I rebooted my computer, cleared my browser cache, tried a different browser, the frantic clicks of the mouse echoing in the quiet room. Nothing. The digital wall remained impenetrable. The screen, once a window to my future, had become a blank, unforgiving barrier. I switched back to the main exchange where the bulk of the funds still resided, tried to log in there, thinking maybe the smaller platform was just having issues, a fleeting hope that quickly evaporated. That's when the real dread set in. My login credentials, the ones I had used for months, were suddenly rejected. Not incorrect, but rejected, as if the account didn't exist or had been locked. The cursor blinked mockingly on the screen, a silent accusation. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw its way up my throat, constricting my breath. A metallic taste filled my mouth. I tried the two-factor authentication, digging out my old phone for the backup codes, my hands trembling so violently I could barely key them in, the small plastic buttons feeling slippery under my frantic touch. Each failed attempt amplified the rising terror, a sickening lurch in my stomach. The digital keys, the carefully guarded seed phrase, the layers of security I had painstakingly set up, all felt utterly useless, a hollow shell of protection. It was like standing outside my own house, watching the lights on inside, knowing my most prized possessions were there, but finding every door and window inexplicably sealed shut, a ghost in my own digital domain, powerless and locked out. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. I spent the next several hours in a frantic, desperate haze, the blueberry pancakes from breakfast a distant, forgotten memory. My wife had already left for her office, unaware of the silent catastrophe unfolding in our quiet home, a stark isolation in my terror. I called the customer support for the major exchange, only to be met with automated menus and long hold times, the tinny music on the line a cruel counterpoint to my escalating panic. When I finally reached a human voice, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke in a detached, pre-recorded cadence, assuring me that all security measures were in place and that accounts were only locked for suspicious activity. Suspicious activity. Mine, I wanted to scream, it was mine. My voice was a choked whisper, unheard by the impassive voice on the other end. I tried the smaller platform, receiving equally unhelpful, canned responses about technical difficulties and prolonged investigation periods, each call ending with a heavy sigh of defeat. I scoured forums, desperate for a similar story, a solution, a glimmer of hope, my eyes burning from staring at the screen, a torrent of information, none of it helpful. I read about phishing scams, about sophisticated hacking operations, about funds being siphoned away, never to be seen again, my blood running cold with each terrifying account. The $75,000, that tangible symbol of freedom, of our future security, was still technically there, locked away, visible only as a number I couldn't access, couldn't move, couldn't touch. It wasn't a market crash that wiped it out. It was a digital vanishing act, an impenetrable wall erected between me and my investment, a cruel joke played by unseen forces. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had lost access to my crypto wallet forever. The cold dread intensified, settling deep in my bones, a pervasive chill that seeped into my very core. I felt a profound sense of violation, a complete helplessness that left me numb, hollowed out, as if a vital part of me had been surgically removed. The once comforting hum of my laptop now felt like a taunt, a reminder of the digital frontier that had turned hostile, its metallic casing cool beneath my clammy fingers. The meticulously manicured lawn outside, visible from my window, seemed to mock my shattered sense of control, its perfect symmetry highlighting the chaos within. The blueberry pancakes from breakfast felt like lead in my stomach, threatening to resurface. That night when my wife came home, the usual warmth of her presence felt distant, almost alien, as if she were a stranger observing my silent unraveling. I tried to feign normalcy, a brittle smile on my lips, but my face, I knew, was a mask of strain, my eyes betraying the deep exhaustion and terror. My mind replayed the frantic attempts, the cold error messages, the realization that everything I had built, every late night spent researching, every calculated risk had simply vanished into the ether, leaving behind only a void. The silence in the house, usually a comfort, now felt heavy, oppressive, filled with the unspoken weight of my secret, a dark cloud hanging over us. I couldn't meet her eyes over dinner. The simple act of slicing a piece of chicken felt monumental, my hands still trembling slightly from the day's ordeal. the knife a heavy, unfamiliar object. The unspoken question hung in the air. What was wrong? She asked, her voice soft, tentative. Eventually, noticing my profound distraction, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I picked at my food without eating. I mumbled something vague about a difficult day at work, a challenging project, but the lie felt brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest touch, a flimsy curtain trying to conceal a gaping hole. The marital strain, once a subtle undercurrent, had become a palpable tension, a cold front moving in, freezing the warmth between us. The weight of the $75,000, now a phantom sum, pressed down on me, a heavy burden of guilt and failure, a silent accusation echoing in my mind. The burden of that secret grew heavier with each passing day. My sleep became restless, haunted by images of digital locks and inaccessible balances, the flickering blue light of a screen imprinted behind my eyelids. The aroma of morning coffee, once a gentle awakening, now just reminded me of the start of another day I had to carry this alone, another day of feigning normalcy. I'd try to recover access again, in quiet moments, late at night or early morning, each failed attempt a fresh stab of despair, a renewed sense of futility washing over me. The empty coffee cup would sit cold beside my laptop, a monument to my fruitless efforts. I even contacted a specialist firm, one that claimed to help with lost crypto, but their fees were exorbitant, and their assurances vague, preying on desperation, it felt, adding another layer of cynicism to my already jaded outlook. The phone calls were brief, unsatisfactory, leaving me feeling even more exposed and vulnerable. The $75,000 wasn't just a number. It was the symbol of my quiet ambition, my escape route from the golden handcuffs, my promise of financial freedom. Now it was a ghost, a haunting presence that followed me everywhere, a constant whisper of what could have been. My mood plummeted, affecting everything. I became withdrawn, less engaged in conversations, my thoughts constantly circling back to the loss, to what I could have done differently, to the endless loop of regret. My wife, perceptive as always, couldn't ignore the change. The initial gentle inquiries turned into more direct questions, her concern deepening into frustration, a faint edge creeping into her voice. One evening, after I'd snapped at her over a trivial matter, a misplaced set of keys, the dam broke. The words tumbled out, a confession laced with shame and self-recrimination, a torrent of suppressed fear and guilt. I told her about the crypto, about the $75,000, about losing access, each word a painful tear in the fragile fabric of our trust. The air in our usually warm kitchen turned instantly cold, the cozy glow of the pendant lights suddenly harsh. Her face, usually so open, became a canvas of shock, then anger, then a profound disappointment that cut deeper than any harsh word, a silent judgment that pierced my core. She reminded me of my dismissal of her earlier concerns, her quiet warnings about the risks, her gentle suggestions to be cautious with such volatile investments, her words now echoing with a painful accuracy. She didn't shout, her voice was dangerously quiet, each word a carefully aimed dart, finding its mark in my already wounded spirit. She spoke of our budget, of our shared goals, of the growing anxiety she felt about inflation, about rising costs, about the pressure of supporting our aging parents, the sandwich generation burden that weighed on us both, a responsibility that now felt overwhelming. The weight of our mortgage, once a sign of stability, now felt like a crushing stone, trapping us in a cycle that felt harder to escape without that phantom safety net, that illusory buffer against life's uncertainties. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the sound of our shared trust splintering, each shard a painful memory. The cold distance between us in bed that night was more chilling than any winter air, the space beside her a chasm I couldn't bridge. The soft fabric of the sheets felt alien, unfamiliar against my skin. The financial comparison poisoning friendships also began to manifest. My friend, the one I had confided in, the one who had also invested, though thankfully less, started to distance himself. He'd seen my ambition, my seemingly effortless gains, and there was a subtle jealousy I realized now in his admiration. When my loss became evident in my demeanor, in my sudden aversion to discussing anything crypto, he became quiet, then subtly accusatory, hinting that my advice might have steered him wrong, even though his own choices were his own, a bitter taste in my mouth. The camaraderie we'd shared, once so vibrant with shared dreams, crumbled, replaced by an uncomfortable silence, a ruined friendship, another casualty of my ill-fated pursuit. At work, my performance began to suffer. My focus was shattered, my concentration fleeting, my mind constantly replaying the agonizing loops of loss. The deadlines felt heavier, the creative energy that once fueled me was gone, replaced by a dull ache of despair. My boss noticed, the gentle inquiries about my well-being giving way to firmer conversations about deliverables and commitment. his tone increasingly impatient. The tech startup, once a vibrant hub of innovation, now felt like a cage, the golden handcuffs tightening with each passing day, the hum of the servers now a mocking drone. The very reason I sought crypto in the first place, freedom from this life, now felt like a cruel irony, pushing me deeper into its confines, trapping me further. Then came the meeting, a cold, formal gathering in a glass-walled conference room. The air was sterile, charged with unspoken tension. The CEO, a man I had admired, sat across from me, his expression grim, his gaze unwavering. The startup, despite its initial promise, was undergoing a significant restructuring, a quiet collapse from within. Layoffs. My name was on the list. I was fired. The news hit me not with the initial shock I might have once expected, but with a strange, hollow sense of inevitability, as if the universe were simply correcting a trajectory I had already foreseen. It was another domino falling in a cascade of losses, each one echoing the last. The quiet desperation intensified, now amplified by the crushing weight of unemployment. Now, not only was the future fund gone, but the present income stream had dried up. Our carefully constructed financial stability, the illusion of security, was unraveling before my very eyes, threads coming undone. The chill of morning air felt colder than ever, biting at my exposed skin. The empty coffee cups on the table seemed to symbolize the emptiness I felt inside, a quiet despair seeping into every corner of our lives, staining everything with its gray hue. I'd walk by the supermarket, scanning the menu for sales, something I hadn't done in years, feeling the prickle of anxiety as I imagined the bills piling up, the mortgage payments looming, a heavy weight pressing on my chest. The brightly lit aisles, once a mundane backdrop, now felt overwhelming, each price tag a silent judgment. The pressure of being in the sandwich generation weighed heavily, thoughts of my aging parents, future needs, medical expenses, combining with our own sudden precarity, creating a suffocating knot of worry. I felt trapped, utterly trapped by circumstances, by my own misjudgments, and by the relentless march of inflation against our shrinking resources, a ship slowly sinking despite my desperate attempts to bail water. My evenings were spent staring at the ceiling, replaying the choices, the what-ifs, the cruel twists of fate. My wife, though still wounded, tried to offer comfort, but my shame built a wall between us that even her quiet presence struggled to penetrate. The once bright prospect of a growing family now felt like a distant, unattainable dream, replaced by the stark reality of how fragile our foundation truly was. Every phone call from an unknown number made my heart leap, hoping it was a job offer, dreading it was another bill collector. The gleaming SUVs of our neighbors, once a source of envy, now seemed like symbols of a world I no longer belonged to, a world of effortless abundance that had cruelly rejected me. The days that followed the layoff were a blur of numb routine. I'd wake before my wife, the first faint light barely touching the walls of our apartment, and make coffee, its aroma now a gentle comfort rather than a stark reminder of lost potential. I'd sit with the steaming mug in my hands, feeling the warmth spread through my chilled fingers, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the pre-dawn stillness, a sound that no longer felt like a taunt, but merely a constant presence. The weight of everything was immense, a heavy cloak I wore through each day, but something subtle began to shift beneath its folds. With the job gone, the pressure to maintain appearances in the affluent neighborhood faded, slowly dissolving like morning mist. There was no one to impress, no internal corporate ladder to climb, no golden handcuffs to chafe, no phantom standard to chase. A peculiar, almost unwelcome sense of liberation began to creep in, a strange lightness in the absence of external expectation. The frantic energy that had once driven me, the ceaseless striving, began to subside, replaced by a quiet emptiness that gradually, surprisingly, made space for something else. My wife, despite the anger and disappointment that still lingered, a faint shadow in her eyes, became a steadfast presence. In the evenings, after the initial shock wore off, she'd sit with me on the couch, not talking about finances or future plans, not demanding explanations, but just being there, her quiet strength a solid anchor. We started taking long walks in the park near our house, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot a soothing rhythm, watching the changing colors of autumn, the simple beauty of nature a balm to our frayed nerves. The crisp air on my face, the earthy smell of damp soil, the sight of squirrels scurrying for nuts, these small sensory details began to reclaim a part of my awareness that had been lost in the digital haze of charts and numbers. We rediscovered the joy of cooking simple meals together, the scent of garlic and herbs filling our kitchen, the shared act of creation more fulfilling, more tangible than any expensive restaurant dinner or abstract crypto gain. Her quiet laughter over a burnt piece of toast, my clumsy attempts at chopping vegetables, these small moments of shared humanity began to knit us back together. We started a simple budget, a careful, collaborative effort, cutting back on unnecessary expenses, canceling subscriptions, things we hadn't even noticed we were paying for, a slow excavation of our lives. It wasn't about deprivation, it was about mindful living, a quiet reevaluation of what truly mattered, a stripping away of the superfluous. I started helping my aging parent more actively. They had always been fiercely independent, proud in their self-sufficiency, but now with more time on my hands, I could assist with practical tasks, grocery runs, garden work, just being present, sitting with them as they watched the birds outside their window. The conversations we had were simple, filled with stories of their past, quiet wisdom that seemed more profound than any market analysis or blockchain theory. I would listen to the cadence of their voice, noticing the small wrinkles around their eyes when they smiled, the way their hands, gnarled with age, still found comfort in knitting. It was in these moments, watching my parents' serene face as they recounted a childhood memory, or feeling the rough texture of the garden soil as I pulled weeds, the sun warm on my back, that I began to feel a shift within me. The constant anxiety about the lost $75,000, about the startup collapse, about the looming bills, didn't vanish entirely, a phantom ache still present, but it receded, making space for something else, a quiet sense of connection and purpose. I started applying for jobs, but my approach had changed. The frantic chase for high-flying tech roles, for the next big thing, for the illusion of rapid wealth, was gone. Instead, I sought stability, a sense of purpose, a place where I could contribute without feeling trapped by the promise of illusory wealth, a job that allowed for genuine human interaction and a clear separation between work and life. I took a few freelance gigs, enough to keep things afloat, to ease the immediate pressure, and the act of creating something with my own hands, of seeing tangible results, felt more satisfying, more real than watching abstract numbers fluctuate on a screen. The quiet satisfaction of crafting a well-written report, of solving a concrete problem for a client, brought a different kind of fulfillment. The friendship with my former colleague never fully recovered, a gently bittersweet reminder of past misjudgments, of how ambition can warp genuine connection, but other, simpler connections began to form. I started frequenting the local coffee shop near our building, not for networking, but for the quiet comfort of familiar faces, the murmur of everyday conversations, the simple pleasure of a well-made latte, the warmth of the ceramic cup in my hands, the bittersweet scent of freshly ground beans. My wife and I talked more openly, truly communicating for the first time in years, stripping away the layers of pretense and unspoken resentments. The betrayal I felt from the hack, the shame of my loss, slowly began to heal through her unwavering, albeit initially strained, support. We acknowledged the marital strain, the silent debt of my risky investments, the damage I had inadvertently caused, and slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild our financial foundation, not on speculative dreams, but on solid ground, on shared decisions, on mutual trust. A new budget laid out on the kitchen table, discussed over steaming mugs of tea. I learned to appreciate the smaller joys, the first crisp bite of an apple, the soft warmth of a blanket on a cool evening, the sound of rain against the window, the gentle brush of my wife's hand against mine during our walks. These weren't grand gestures or luxurious experiences, but simple, everyday moments that, when truly noticed, filled the empty spaces that the pursuit of wealth had left. The quiet desperation of keeping up appearances in our affluent neighborhood had dissolved. We were still there, still living in the house with the meticulously manicured lawn, but our focus had shifted inward, to the quiet contentment of our own lives, not to the perceived perfection of others. I realized that the true golden handcuffs weren't the high salary trapping me in a life I disliked, but my own attachment to a certain idea of success, a certain definition of freedom, an internal prison I had built for myself. The psychological weight of that relentless pursuit had been heavier than any financial burden. The road back wasn't quick, and it certainly wasn't without its own bumps. There were still moments, quiet evenings, when the memory of the lost $75,000 would resurface, a pang of regret for the opportunity squandered, the lesson learned so harshly, a cold knot forming in my stomach. But those pangs became less frequent, less sharp, fading like an old photograph. I eventually found a new job, not with the dazzling prestige or the high-growth potential of my previous tech startup, but with a solid, established company, offering stability and a work-life balance that allowed me to be present, truly present, in my life, rather than perpetually chasing a distant horizon. The salary was comfortable, not extravagant, but enough, more than enough, for our needs, allowing us to plan with confidence, to address the mounting bills without the old suffocating anxiety. We still had our mortgage, still faced the realities of rising costs and the pressures of the sandwich generation, but the anxiety that once suffocated me had dissipated, replaced by a grounded sense of resilience and shared purpose. My wife and I built a new budget, a shared framework for our finances that was transparent and collaborative, each decision made together, each step a joint effort. We started small, steady investments in more traditional avenues, things we understood, things that didn't demand constant vigilance or induce heart-stopping volatility, preferring the quiet confidence of slow, measured growth to the wild swings of speculation. The thrill of rapid gains had been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of slow, steady growth, of building something resilient together, brick by brick, not digital block by digital block. I would still make my morning coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen, a comforting ritual, but now as I held the warm mug, I saw not just the promise of caffeine, but the simple, profound beauty of another day, another opportunity to live meaningfully, to connect, to appreciate. The walls of our apartment, once just a backdrop to my digital ambitions, now felt like the secure embrace of a home, filled with shared laughter and quiet understanding, a sanctuary from the relentless outside world. My friend, the one whose friendship had been strained by my crypto endeavors, eventually reached out. We met for coffee, and there was a quiet, unspoken understanding between us, a shared acknowledgement of past mistakes and the complex emotions that had poisoned our connection. We didn't fully rekindle the old camaraderie, that heady rush of shared financial dreams, but we found a new, gentler path, one built on empathy rather than comparison, a quiet nod to the past, a step towards a simpler future. The freedom I had chased, the one I thought would come from that $75,000, had ironically arrived through its loss. It wasn't the freedom to buy anything, to escape all responsibility. It was the freedom from the ceaseless pursuit, the freedom from comparison, the freedom from the insidious anxiety that wealth, when pursued relentlessly, can bring, a liberation from my own self-imposed chains. I learned that true freedom wasn't an external asset, like a cold wallet full of altcoins, but an internal state, a quiet contentment with what I had, with the simple joys of everyday life. The warmth of my wife's hand in mine during our evening walks, the shared laughter over a home-cooked meal, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, the unshakable bond of family, the simple act of pruning a rose bush. The emptiness I had once felt was slowly filled, not with money, but with presence, with connection, with a newfound appreciation for the ordinary miracles of existence, the gentle rhythm of a life lived authentically. The ending wasn't a sudden grand triumph, but a warm, gently bittersweet contentment, a quiet understanding that sometimes, losing everything is the only way to truly find yourself, to shed the illusions and embrace the enduring truth of what truly nourishes the soul. What's a financial gamble you've taken that taught you a profound lesson about priorities or true freedom? Share your insights and experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe for more stories of life, loss, and learning. And tell me, what's one small joy you experienced this week that truly made you feel alive?